Hey everybody, welcome back to Adventures in Old Fashions. More tales from the trails for you tonight. I think I'm going to call this one Setting Up a Wet Tent in a Dry Camp. So, I think last time I updated everybody, I was heading into a stretch where there was scarce water sources. Um, and the irony of it is that I'm also was in, right in the middle of one of those atmospheric rivers they talk about. So we got rain for like 2 days straight. Finally let up about 1 o'clock this afternoon, but most of the day, all this morning, all last night, all day yesterday, pretty much, it rained and rained and rained. Um, but surprisingly, the water sources were still dry because none of that water has trickled down into the streams yet. So, last night I called it a day. It was just about dark, and I'd been hiking since about 10 o'clock in the rain. So, everything was wet. It was soaked. My pack was wet, my shoes, my pants, my shirt, my rain jacket. I don't know if it had gotten wetted out where it just saturated from the outside and just can only repel so much water, or if I'd sweated from the inside out and soaked myself that way. Either way, everything was wet. It was damp. It was raining. I was up on this place called Sargent's Mesa, and it's a kind of a high plateau, wide open like grassland. Like there were cattle there this morning. Little pockets of trees here and there. Up like 11,500 ish feet. So right around tree line. Um, and I was in the clouds. I could see maybe 100 yards. I could make out like shadows of trees off in the distance off the trail here and there, little pockets. And it got to the point where I'm like, I need to make camp. So I got off trail, got myself into some trees, and set up my tarp as an awning, set up the tent under the tarp as best I could so I wasn't getting the tent soaked in the process of setting it up. Got my sleeping pad down, which is perfect. I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's about not quite 25 inches wide, and the tent floor is like 25 inches wide. So that folding accordion pad makes a floor perfectly in that tent, and I could put my inflatable mattress on that and my sleeping bag on that. So I got everything set up. I'm drenched. Luckily, I lined my backpack with a compactor bag, so everything in that was at least dry. So my sleeping bag was dry. I had dry clothes to put on, um, and it was rough. It was cold. It was about 50 degrees, so not cold, but when you're wet, that's a concerning cold. That's a temperature that can cause some problems. Um, I don't think I got hypothermic because I got into some dry clothes while I was still pretty warm from hiking. My fingers were cold and wet, and tying knots and stuff was a problem, but that happens all the time anyway. So I got things set up and got situated. The problem was that it wasn't like a official campsite. I just found a kind of flat spot between like a handful of pine trees that was big enough to fit the tent. Didn't have any roots or rocks that were sticking up, but it was at quite a bit of an angle. So all night long I kept sliding down. The tarp I brought one of those 9x7s, which is actually like 8 foot 4 inches by 6 foot 4 inches. So it wasn't quite big enough to cover the whole tent. So it was draining off on the foot of the tent and the head of the tent. And the most waterproof tent isn't really waterproof when it gets doused constantly. But luckily, with the pad and my sleeping mat, I was able to keep my sleeping bag up off the wet floor of the tent. So that stayed dry all night. I just kept having to scooch myself back up towards the head of the tent, and then I'd scooch myself down and wake up and I'm all bald at the bottom of the tent, kind of a thing. But made it through. Today, like I said, this morning it rained until about 1 o'clock. So I just stayed put. I was dry. I was warm. Um, I didn't want to risk soaking the sleeping bag and my dry clothes trying to pack up and hike in the rain again. So I just kind of waited it out. It stopped raining. I aired some things out, hung some stuff up. Everything's still damp though. So that's why I said it's a setting up a wet temp in a dry camp because there's no water. The spot I was going to get water today that I camped close to is a big stock tank that I thought would at least have something in it after that rain, but it didn't. And of course, I don't know if it was a little bit of hypothermia or just being tired and worn out from the day. I had rainwater running off that tarp for like 12 hours and I didn't collect a drop. So I've been rationing water yesterday and all day today. I still had another 4 miles to go to Baldy Lake, which is the next water source. And the sun's down. It's dark, getting dark. And I'm like, I got to stop. So it'll be another dry camp tonight. I'll be sipping on water just to keep my mouth wet. But fortunately, tomorrow, it's, I think, 3.5, 4 miles to the lake. So it won't take me too long to get there, get reloaded. But then from there, it's like another 20-mile stretch before there's water that's reliable. I think with all this rain, some of those seasonal creeks might be flowing again, but I can't count on it. So I'm going to camel up at the lake, drink as much as I can stomach, and then carry as much as I have the capacity for, and then bust out and see if I can't get that 20-mile stretch taken care of in, a little over a day and go from there. But just want to give you guys a little update. I'll post this when I can. Hope you're having a great night.